it's not like it's seen on the outside having casual sexual relationships as this fun thing. It's not fun.
No.
And nobody thinks it's fun, especially women.
These beliefs about women and casual sex seem to be prominent in manosphere podcasts or manosphere adjacent online spaces, and sometimes even in real life conversations. They revolve around ideas that women cannot ever enjoy casual sex, that casual sex cannot ever be fun for women, and that there must be something wrong with women who want to have casual sex. But is there any truth to these beliefs? Is there something wrong with women who want to have casual sex? And what about women who don't want to have casual sex? Is there something wrong with them? Hi everyone, I'm Francesca and I'm a social scientist who likes to discuss data and findings about women and gender relations. And in this video, I want to talk about false stereotypes that people hold about women and casual sex. Now, spoiler, the main goal of this video is to present evidence that there is nothing wrong with women who want to have casual sex, and there is nothing wrong with women who don't either. Of course, some people, especially women in some cases, can feel pressured or forced to have casual sex, which is definitely bad and a big problem. But here I'm talking about women who willingly have casual sex and enjoy casual relationships and how there's nothing wrong with them. So let's start by diving deeper into the stereotypes associated with these women. Nowadays, unfortunately, it doesn't take that much effort to find online content that is all about judging women and their choices. It's not uncommon to find bro science podcasts or manosphere adjacent podcasts that present their conservative views on women and dating as objective facts. And this is especially true for anything that has got to do with women and casual sex. There are people like Jordan Peterson and his daughter Michaela who don't think that short term casual relationships are ever morally acceptable in general.
People rationalize that constantly because they want to believe, that short-term hedonistic gratification is ethically acceptable. And I don't think it is.
And also think that casual relationships could never be fun or enjoyable for women in particular.
It's not like it's seen on the outside having casual sexual relationships as this fun thing. It's not fun.
No.
And nobody thinks it's fun, especially women. So if you're around other girls and they're like, oh yeah, I hooked up with this guy, none of you guys are actually enjoying that.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's a lie that women tell each other.
There are straightforwardly misogynistic podcasts that push views like that women having a high body count is disturbing.
Because, don't judge my body count and I won't judge yours. Clean slate, whatever happens in the past stays in the past.
All right, cool. So what's your body count then, since it don't matter? Oh, well, with a woman with a high body count, you'd be disturbed.
Yeah.
What about you? What are your thoughts?
No, same.
You'd be disturbed
I'll be disturbed
if you were a
with
man?
if I was a man and my girl was running the streets with a high body, yeah, because then everybody would know.
All right, fair.
Or that a woman with a high body count cannot ever be a good long-term partner.
It's pretty much almost factually sound at this point to say the more promiscuous a woman is, or the more promiscuous of a past she has, the more potential problems you might have in your marriage or long-term relationship with her.
Then there are podcast hosts that clearly have got their own strong opinions about whether it is ever fun or freeing for women to have casual sex, and have takes like this one.
Elle and Cosmopolitan will happily write articles teaching women how to sleep with him and not catch feelings. Hang on, your article is teaching women how to disembody themselves from letting another person inside of them so that they can claim that that's freedom? That doesn't sound particularly free to me.
And then there are people like journalist / book author Louise Perry who go on a lot of these podcasts and also seem to be really hell-bent on arguing that casual sex can never be a natural behavior or a fun or enjoyable behavior for women, and have opinions and advice for women like this.
the sexual revolution was kicked off by the pill, and which did a pretty good job of severing the link between sex and reproduction, and kind of gave the impression that sex could just be a leisure activity, that it didn't have to mean anything, it could just be sort of a bit of fun. And my argument is actually that idea that sex is just a bit of fun, it doesn't really mean anything, suits male interests much more than it does female. When women are trying to play the masculine role and to imitate male sexuality and to enjoy sex in the way that they think they're supposed to, they are basically obliged to suppress their instincts, which isn't at all psychologically healthy. So I think, for instance, it's a good idea for women not to have sex on a first date, or not even to have sex in the first 3 months, because that gives you the opportunity to assess whether or not he considers you to be good time only, or if you're wife material.
Now, there is a lot of research that shows that on average men desire and are into casual sex more than women. A lot of studies do show that, and anecdotally, probably a lot of people would agree with that, that men are more into casual sex than women are. I think, though, what some of these podcasters and journalists and authors are doing is taking these scientific findings or even just their own experiences to an extreme to sort of support their conservative viewpoints and ignore a lot of the other evidence that shows that even though men are more into casual sex than women on average, there is a lot of variation within each gender, and there definitely are some women who desire and enjoy casual sex. They exist, and in a second I'll show you the evidence that shows that there is nothing fundamentally wrong or broken or unnatural about these women that makes them different from or worse than other women. Okay, but if you're watching this video, maybe you're thinking it's not that surprising that these types of podcasts have these views on women and casual sex, and I agree. But I want to point out that there are also a lot of other forms of media, like TV shows that are prevalently for a female audience, that also kind of end up perpetuating these ideas and stereotypes, even if generally in more subtle ways. Think, for example, of recent TV shows like Tell Me Lies, where the protagonist is a college woman who has a super toxic relationship with a casual sexual partner and who seems to continue wanting to have casual sex with this very toxic man. And it seems from the storyline of the TV show, at least, that this is out of a place of insecurity and low self-esteem in most instances. Or think of characters like Cassie from Euphoria, or even Brooke Davis from One Tree Hill, were often depicted as engaging in casual relationships to seek male validation. Most of their storylines suggest that they enter these relationships because they're feeding their insecurities, basically, and because they suffer from low self-esteem and other issues, and in some cases, they have to almost trick themselves into thinking they're happy with their choices. I have never, ever been happier! Even characters like Fleabag or Marianne from Normal People, these are beautiful, complex female characters, but they're often depicted as having casual sexual relationships to deal with some previous trauma or troubled past, and sometimes low self-esteem. And I think most of these shows are very well done. And they feel very authentic and accurate because they do reflect some of the experiences that women do go through. And I love a lot of these TV shows and characters myself, but why is it so common that women who have casual sex on TV shows seem to suffer from some trauma and insecurities and low self-esteem? Like, why is it so hard to find female characters that are secure and confident in the types of sexual relationships that they want to have? And yes, most of these TV shows are dramas, but there are also reality TV shows like Too Hot to Handle, for example, where the whole message of the show seems to be that there is something wrong with people who seek casual relationships. to be fair to that show, they make that argument for both male and female participants, not only for women. And I guess it's just a silly reality TV show, but I think that type of TV show would be way more valuable if it focused on teaching consent or how not to be manipulative in casual relationships and treat all your sexual partners with respect, instead of teaching contestants that casual sex and short-term relationships are bad in general, because I think the whole premise of abstinence or only having exclusive long-term relationships for young hot people is not very realistic. And in fact, most of the couples that form on this show don't end up working out. But I guess an educational reality TV show like the one I'm thinking about would not be nearly as entertaining and messy. Anyways, I'm pointing these out and using these examples from TV shows because the stereotype that women who have casual sex also have low self-esteem, for example, is one of the most prevalent ones. So now, let's see what social science research says about these and similar stereotypes. Besides Manosphere or Manosphere adjacent podcasts that seem to like to be critical of women's sexual choices, and besides the somewhat stereotypical portrayals of women who have casual sex on TV shows, how do most people actually feel about women and casual sex? Do most people think that casual sex is bad for women? Do most people think that women who have casual sex have low self-esteem? Well, unfortunately, that seems to be the case. For example, a recent paper that analyzed and summarized data from many different studies on the sexual double standard, with a total over 100,000 surveyed participants across studies, found that the sexual double standard is still alive and well. Frequent sexual activity was less expected from women than from men, and was evaluated less positively or more negatively for women than for men. Although, across studies that ask participants about the sexual double standard with more explicit measurements, the authors did not find any evidence for the sexual double standard. So it seems that people still judge women more negatively for having sex often than men, but not so much when they're asked explicitly. Another paper published in Psychological Science that collected data from over 1,000 participants from the US also consistently found over 6 experiments that people stereotype women, but not men who have casual sex. Participants believed that women, but not men who have casual sex, also have low self-esteem. 2 additional papers on this topic only partly replicated these findings, but the experimental designs in the studies were very different from the original one, suggesting that generally there is evidence that people stereotype women who have casual sex as having low self-esteem, but perhaps not in all contexts and situations, and sometimes men who have casual sex can be stereotyped as having low self-esteem as well. So now that we've looked at data that show that in most cases people do hold the stereotype that women who have casual sex also have low self-esteem, we have to ask, is this stereotype true? Do women who have casual sex suffer from low self-esteem? And is their well-being negatively affected by casual sex? Well, the authors of the Psychological Science paper that I just mentioned not only asked research participants for their opinions about women and casual sex, but also collected information on the participants' own sexual behaviors and self-esteem, which meant asking participants how good they felt about themselves. And what did they find? Well, they found that across all experiments and for both women and men, sexual behavior, including having casual sex, was not correlated at all with self-esteem. So having casual sex or not having casual sex was not related to how good people felt about themselves. Another very recent study replicated these results using data that were collected from over 8,000 US participants between 1990 and 2019. They also found that sexual behavior was not at all linked to self-esteem, again, for neither women nor men. It's only when they dissected the data more and looked at different components of self esteem separately that they found some significant relationships. For appearance related self esteem, so how good people felt about how they looked, having sex more frequently was related to higher self esteem for both men and women. So people who had more casual sex felt better about how they looked compared to people who had less casual sex, which I guess is a pretty intuitive result. But it's not weird to think that casual sex might not be a positive experience for everyone. And it is definitely true that in some cases, or for some people, having casual sex can negatively impact well being. So, in what cases and for which people having casual sex is not such a great idea? Well, some researchers thought that maybe if people are not comfortable with the idea of casual sex because they hold conservative values, or if people feel pressured to have casual sex, that is when having casual sex might be linked to having lower self esteem and worse well being. And this is pretty much what a researcher found in a study of over 500 undergraduate students in the US. Having casual sex for what they called non autonomous reasons, for example, because people felt pressured to have casual sex, was linked to lower self esteem and higher depression and anxiety. However, people who had casual sex because they genuinely wanted to were not affected. Having casual sex for these people was not related to any of the bad outcomes for well being. Compared to peers who didn't have any casual sex, those who had casual sex for the wrong reasons or because they felt pressured typically had inferior well being. But it was also true that compared to peers who didn't have any casual sex, those who had casual sex because they genuinely wanted to instead had higher self esteem. And this was all true for both men and women. In another similar study of undergraduate students, researchers tested whether being comfortable with and accepting of the idea of casual sex, so basically being a sexually liberal versus a more sexually conservative person, would affect the relationship between having casual sex and well being. And they found that that was the case. And sexually liberal students typically reported higher well being, higher self esteem, and less life satisfaction, especially after having casual sex compared to not having casual sex. Instead, there were no such differences among more conservative individuals. For them, having casual sex was not related to well being. And this again was also all true for both men and women. And in yet another study with undergraduate women, researchers found the same exact pattern, but in this case for sexual well being specifically. To measure sexual well being, women were asked how much they agreed with statements like, in general, I feel like my sexual experiences have given me a more positive view of myself. Having sex within exclusive relationships was associated with the highest sexual well being, but women who had casual sex and had liberal attitudes about sex had the next highest levels of well being, and higher well being than women who didn't have sex recently. It was only for women who had conservative attitudes about sex that having casual sex corresponded to below average sexual well being. One of the authors of some of the papers that I just talked about, Dr. Brangalova, is an NYU professor and one of the main experts on casual sex. She actually gave a TEDx talk on whether casual sex is good or bad for people, and she had these things to say.
Whether casual sex is good for you or not depends on who you are and how you do it. There are many factors that this relationship can depend on, and I couldn't possibly cover all of them in one 18-minute talk. But one critical one is authenticity. Doing only the kinds of things that are fully in line with who you are, your beliefs, your values, your desires, your needs. You know, casual sex is not for everyone. Nothing sexual ever is, really. Due to differences in nature, nurture, and life circumstances, some of us have a much stronger general need for sexual novelty and much greater comfort having sex with people we don't know very well. So figure out where you are on this spectrum. You know, is hooking up with people you're not dating something that sounds enjoyable, exciting, an important experience to have, morally acceptable to you? Would you be hooking up with this person even if you're never going to see them afterwards? If the answer to most of these is no, you shouldn't really be doing it.
Another really important factor that I haven't even talked about yet is sexual pleasure. It's very possible that casual sex can only correspond to positive outcomes for people who manage to derive sexual pleasure from the experience. Instead, casual sex might not be such a nice experience for those who don't. And that's what another study found, collecting data from over 500 young people between 18 and 35. For both young women and men, being sexually assertive predicted sexual pleasure, and in turn, higher sexual pleasure was associated with experiencing more positive emotions and fewer and less negative emotions as a result of having casual sex. So, being sexually assertive matters, and clearly communicating preferences so as to achieve sexual pleasure can really make a difference.
Sexual assertiveness is important no matter the partner type, but it's absolutely paramount with casual partners because they're definitely not psychic. They probably don't know you well or at all, and sometimes they don't care much about your safety or pleasure. So you need to help your partners treat you the way you want to be treated.
So, to summarize all the different research studies that I mentioned, it really seems that sexual behavior, for the most part, is unrelated to things like self-esteem and well-being for both men and women. If there were any findings that indicated that having casual sex is linked to lower self-esteem and worse well-being, it was only for certain people, like people who are sexually conservative and do not approve of casual sex, or in certain cases, like in cases when people felt pressure to have casual sex or had casual sex for the wrong reasons, or in cases when people did not get sexual pleasure from casual sex. All these findings then suggest that women who willingly have casual sex because they enjoy it do not suffer from low self-esteem, despite what many people might think. So knowing all this, how can we move forward and fight these stereotypes that people hold about women and casual sex?
Here's all you really need to know about today. If you're fat, dumb, sexual, and a guy, you're okay. If you're a girl, not so much. Please tell me that's changed in the future.
Since I started this video by showing somewhat stereotypical portrayals of women on TV shows, one place to start to fight these stereotypes about women and casual sex could be television and similar media. For example, making TV shows with less stereotypical and more nuanced portrayals of female characters. Now, creating some female characters who have casual sex for the wrong reasons, for example, because they suffer from low self-esteem and seek male validation or something, is fine, of course, especially if these characters and their story arcs are given depth and accurately represent some of the experiences that women go through. However, it would also be great to have female characters who decide to have casual sex because of the right reasons, because they enjoy it. And these characters should be presented as happy and secure in their choices. And the same applies to female characters who don't want to have casual sex, those who want to have no sex at all, or those who only want to have sex within exclusive long-term relationships. It would be great if these characters were also presented as being secure and happy with their choices. And although I think there are fewer examples of these types of female characters on TV shows, a few do come to mind. The first one that comes to mind is, of course, the one and only Samantha Jones from Sex and the City. Generally, Samantha is presented as a strong, independent woman who is very confident and happy with her sex life. She has casual sex because she enjoys it, and she rarely regrets having short-term casual relationships. And a couple more examples that I could think of come from more recent TV shows like the sex lives of college girls. Unfortunately, that show has just been canceled, but it had a somewhat successful 3-season run. The show followed 4 college roommates as they navigated college and, as the title suggests, their sex lives. I liked the show because the 4 young women protagonists were all pretty different from each other. They had different sexual orientations in some cases, they had different preferences regarding when or whether to have casual sex. And even though they do have some awkward or unpleasant sex encounters at times, they were all portrayed as being pretty confident and happy with their choices, and they were not shamed or stereotyped for their choices. And again, these types of TV shows are very important because in today's society still, given the stereotypes and straight up discrimination toward women who have casual sex, it's still so hard to see depictions of women who genuinely want to have casual sex, or even just imagine that women who seek out sex for their own pleasure and enjoyment exist. And I think we find ourselves in this situation mostly because of 2 reasons. One, we often view women as having to be tricked into having sex or as sexual objects that need to be conquered. And 2, there is still not much conversation about the orgasm gap. So let me dive a little bit more into both of these factors. What do I mean by saying that women are often viewed as having to be tricked into having sex? Well, YouTuber Olurinati has one of the best explanations that I've ever heard for this phenomenon in one of her videos that was about the Aziz Ansari Me Too case.
Because in our society, rape, sexual assault, and rape culture isn't always as clear and openly evil as the monster who physically attacks you or locks your car door. It comes in the forms of boys and men who've been taught to believe they're supposed to wear you down for sex, that your nose are just a game, a song and dance you're doing for them to wear you down because you're not a sexual being who can, should, or will explicitly say you want to have sex. It comes in the form of men who think that they're entitled to have sex with you if you go out with them. It's necessary that we teach everyone, maybe even boys and men in particular, but everyone, that they need enthusiastic consent, and that they should not be trying to manipulate, cajole, wear down, and finesse people into having sex with them. It's necessary, but it's not enough. We must also teach everyone that girls and women are sexual beings who can and should feel empowered to expressly want sex if they want, and that they shouldn't have to pretend not to want sex, or to be embarrassed, or to express that, or to feel compelled to do a song and dance.
I love this video so much, and in particular these beats, because they really highlight the fact that the conversations that we're having about sex do not focus on the right issues. The conversations should not be about whether casual sex is good or bad for you, or whether there is something wrong with women who want to have casual sex. The conversations should be about how we ensure enthusiastic consent and avoid manipulation, even in short-term casual flings. The conversations should be about the fact that women are capable of genuinely desiring sex and therefore should not be tricked into having sex. The second issue, which is very much connected to the first one, is that of the orgasm gap.
Young girls and women are never encouraged to explore their sexuality or sexual needs, to enthusiastically, intentionally, or vocally pursue sex. But instead, we're taught to treat sex as leverage in a negotiation for some larger kind of commitment we must want because we're women. It's never even conceived of that we could or should want to have sex for wanting to have sex sake, that we could or should have multiple sex partners. It's never conceived of that we should voluntarily be giving away sex if we're not getting something else out of it, because surely the sex in and of itself can't be what we get out of it, because boys and men aren't even being taught to see pleasing the women they sleep with as a requirement for sex.
A big problem with casual sex is that men get sexual pleasure from casual sexual encounters much more often than women do.
80% of men had an orgasm during their most recent hookup. This was true of only 40% of women. Now, there's an orgasm gap in romantic encounters too, but it's twice as large in hookups. This doesn't mean that women aren't enjoying it necessarily. In this same study, 90% of the women said they enjoyed their hookup very much. But we can all do better. I mean, this gap needs closing. Women need to learn to be more selfish, demand their sexual pleasure. And men need to learn to be more giving. Try harder to please their partners, even in the briefest of one-night stands.
As a society, we are finally starting to talk about this issue, and it's not uncommon now even for celebrities and pop stars to chime in on the orgasm gap. For example, Chappell Rowan just talked about this on her Call Her Daddy interview.
With men, obviously I was dating some not awesome people, but what the common denominator was, like, they could not get it through their head, like, what they're doing, like, wasn't right. And even if I was being like, I don't think that feels good, they were still doing it. The fact that I have dated so many guys who do it wrong and they haven't figured out that they need to do better, that they need to give more, the giver. And so it was like such a, like, holy fuck. I'm going to write The Giver about showing that actually sex should be a giving experience.
So once again, most of the conversations that we're having about casual sex, those that the Manosphere podcasts love to talk about, are not really the ones that we should be having. We should have more and more conversations about how to ensure that people of all genders who choose to have casual sex come out of the experience happy and satisfied, that people, especially women, are more assertive and clearly communicate what they desire, and that people, especially men, put in more effort to ensure that their partners can achieve sexual pleasure. To end this video, I just want to say again that there is nothing wrong with women who choose to have casual sex, and there is nothing wrong with those who don't want to have casual sex either, based on research that shows that sexual behavior for the most part is unrelated to things like self-esteem and well-being, unlike what online discourse, real life discourse, and even some fictionalized portrayals might make us believe. One way to move forward and fight these stereotypes about women and casual sex could be to start depicting women as willingly participating in sex for their own pleasure and enjoyment, and not as preys that need to be conquered, and not only as individuals who suffer from low self-esteem or past traumas. More productive conversation about casual sex would be to discuss how to close the orgasm gap, how to reduce manipulative tactics and ensure enthusiastic consent, rather than arguing whether or not casual sex is bad or good for women and people in general. And perhaps the problem is also with the term casual itself, because I agree with the discourse that nothing about sex is necessarily casual. I think you have to be a responsible and respectful human being to have any type of sex, including sex outside of exclusive long-term relationships. But sex does happen outside of exclusive relationships often. And if it happens between consenting, age appropriate individuals who respect each other, that is okay. And there is nothing wrong with these people. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. And I really hope you'll tune in for more of my videos in the future as well. Bye.